If you've ever caught yourself whispering under your breath, replaying a conversation aloud, or silently talking yourself through a tough decision, you might have wondered, is this strange? Why do we talk to ourselves as if there's someone else inside our head listening? The truth is, that inner dialogue isn't weird at all. It's one of the most defining features of human consciousness. From a neuroscientific standpoint, self-talk is not a quirk, it's a function. The human brain evolved to think in language, not just to communicate with others, but to communicate with itself. The voice inside your head is essentially your brain narrating experience, reasoning through decisions, and managing emotions. Without it, you'd struggle to plan, reflect, or even understand who you are. This voice begins early in life. As children, we talk aloud while we learn. I need to put this block here. No, that's not right. Try again. Developmental psychologists, especially Lev Vygotsky, discovered that this private speech is how children guide their actions and regulate behavior. Over time, that speech becomes internalized. It moves from being spoken out loud to being silent, yet it serves the same purpose. It's still you talking yourself through life. Inside the brain, this process engages a powerful network, the default mode network, DMN, which lights up when your mind turns inward. It connects the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and reasoning, with regions tied to self-awareness and memory. Essentially, self-talk is your consciousness maintaining its own narrative. It's how you make sense of yourself, by hearing yourself think. But what's fascinating is that your inner voice isn't just one voice. It shifts. Sometimes it's gentle and reassuring. You've got this. Other times it's harsh. You always mess this up. Scientists believe these tonal shifts reflect different parts of the self communicating. Your inner coach, your inner critic, your inner child. Each voice stems from neural patterns shaped by experience, upbringing, and emotional memory. You're not crazy for hearing them. They're echoes of how you've learned to process the world. Interestingly, talking to yourself also has measurable benefits. Studies show that self-directed speech improves focus, memory, and problem solving. When athletes mutter instructions during a game, keep your eye on the ball, or when surgeons narrate steps aloud, they're not being odd, they're optimizing performance. Speaking engages both the auditory and motor regions of the brain, reinforcing what you're doing. It's like creating an internal feedback loop that keeps the mind steady. And then there's emotional regulation. When you're upset and tell yourself, it's okay, breathe, you're using language to calm the limbic system, the brain's emotional center. Studies using fMRI scans have shown that third-person self-talk, you can do this, instead of I can do this, actually reduces amygdala activity, helping people distance themselves from stress and think more clearly. So the way you talk to yourself, the tone, the words, the perspective, physically shapes how your brain reacts to life. Of course, not all self-talk is helpful. When the inner voice becomes judgmental or obsessive, it can trigger anxiety, perfectionism, or self-doubt. But even then, it's not something to eliminate, it's something to understand. The problem isn't that you talk to yourself, it's that sometimes you've let the wrong voice take charge. Culturally, we often associate talking to oneself with eccentricity or instability, a sign of loneliness or madness. But in truth, every human mind does it constantly. It's not weird, it's the soundtrack of thought. Without it, there would be no reflection, no memory, no awareness of self. The difference between healthy and unhealthy self-talk isn't whether you do it, it's how you do it. So, the next time you find yourself whispering a reminder, replaying a memory, or giving yourself a pep talk before a big moment, don't be embarrassed. You're not strange, you're conscious. You're witnessing the mind's most human feature, its ability to speak, to guide, to question, and to comfort itself. That inner voice isn't a flaw in your design, it is your design. It's the dialogue that defines you, the invisible thread that connects your thoughts, emotions, and actions into the continuous story of you. And as we'll see in the next part, that voice isn't just background noise. It's an active force, shaping your behavior, your confidence, and even the way your brain physically develops. If the voice inside your head is the constant narrator of your life, then it's also the director, guiding your choices, shaping your reactions, and defining how you see yourself. What many people don't realize is that this inner voice isn't just a passive background commentary. It's a powerful psychological tool that can either build you up or quietly sabotage you. The way you talk to yourself directly shapes how you feel, how you act, and even how your brain wires itself over time. Every thought you have releases a chemical signal. When your self-talk is encouraging, I can handle this, I've done harder things before. Your brain responds with dopamine and serotonin, neurotransmitters that create motivation, calm, and optimism. But when your inner dialogue turns negative, I'm not good enough. What if I fail? It triggers cortisol, the stress hormone. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and your mind prepares for imaginary threats. In essence, your thoughts are not just mental, they're biochemical. You literally feel what you say to yourself. This connection between self-talk and emotion starts forming early in life. As children, the voice we internalize is often a reflection of the voices around us, our parents, teachers, or peers. Encouraging words nurture resilience. Constant criticism plants seeds of doubt. Over time, these messages merge into the subconscious script we call the inner voice. When life challenges us, the brain automatically replays that script. If the words you heard growing up were harsh, your self-talk may echo them, even years later. But here's the empowering truth: that script can be rewritten. Psychologists call this process cognitive restructuring, the ability to identify distorted thoughts and replace them with more balanced, realistic ones. For instance, instead of "I always fail," you teach your brain to say, "Sometimes things don't go as planned, but I learn and adapt." This isn't wishful thinking, it's neuroplasticity in action. Each time you reframe your inner dialogue, you weaken the neural pathways of negativity and strengthen the ones of confidence and clarity. The voice inside also influences behavior in subtle ways. Self-talk determines how you interpret failure, respond to pressure, and take risks. When your inner voice is supportive, it acts like an internal coach, pushing you to persevere and see challenges as opportunities. But when it's critical, it becomes an inner saboteur, convincing you not to try because it won't work anyway. The difference between a confident person and a fearful one often lies not in ability, but in the tone of their internal dialogue. One fascinating study at Michigan State University found that people who used their own names instead of "I" when talking to themselves performed better under stress. Saying, "You can handle this, Sarah," activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thought, while reducing amygdala activity, which drives fear. This small shift in language helps the mind distance itself from emotion, allowing for calm, strategic decision-making. In other words, how you phrase your self-talk can literally change how your brain processes reality. Your inner voice also regulates motivation and self-discipline. Think about the last time you talked yourself into doing something difficult: waking up early, finishing a task, or pushing through fatigue. That voice was your brain aligning thoughts with action, a process psychologists call self-regulation. Without it, we'd be slaves to impulse. The ability to plan, delay gratification, and stay focused all depend on an active inner dialogue. This is why meditation doesn't aim to eliminate thought, but to clarify it, to turn that inner chatter from noise into guidance. Yet, when the inner voice turns hostile, it becomes the root of anxiety, depression, and self-sabotage. Negative self-talk reinforces feelings of inadequacy and helplessness, trapping people in cycles of self-doubt. It's like living with an invisible bully who knows exactly what to say to make you shrink. Over time, this internal hostility can alter brain chemistry, suppressing reward systems and overactivating stress circuits. You don't just think you're unworthy, your brain begins to believe it. But here's where hope lies. Every time you challenge that voice, you reclaim authority over your mind. When you consciously shift from "I can't" to "I'm learning," or from "I always mess up" to "I'm improving," you're not lying to yourself, you're retraining your neurons. The brain doesn't distinguish between internal dialogue and external speech. What you say to yourself, it records as truth. So, the next time you catch yourself spiraling in self-doubt, pause and listen, not just to what you're saying, but how you're saying it. Is your inner voice kind or cruel? Supportive or cynical? The words you speak inside shape the emotions you feel outside. That voice in your head isn't just a reflection of who you are, it's the architect of who you become. And when you learn to make it your ally instead of your enemy, your entire perception of life begins to shift. Because the most powerful words you'll ever hear aren't from others. They're the ones you whisper to yourself when no one else is listening. Not all inner voices are kind. Some whisper doubts, others shout insecurities, and a few never seem to stop criticizing. While self-talk can be a powerful tool for focus and self-regulation, it can also become a silent enemy when it turns excessively negative or obsessive. In fact, for many people, the voice inside their head isn't a helpful guide. It's a relentless critic that erodes confidence, amplifies fear, and distorts reality. Understanding why this happens requires looking deep into how the brain processes thought, emotion, and identity. Every thought we have triggers a neural pattern, a specific network of brain regions communicating in sync. Over time, frequently repeated thoughts strengthen these pathways through a process called Hebbian learning, summarized by the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. When someone repeatedly tells themselves they're unworthy, unlovable, or incapable, those neural pathways become the default response to any challenge. The brain essentially becomes programmed to believe its own self-criticism. What begins as an occasional negative thought transforms into a mental reflex, an automatic loop of self-doubt. This internal negativity is often linked to overactivity in the amygdala, the brain's threat detector, and underactivity in the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making center. When the amygdala perceives emotional pain, like rejection, failure, or embarrassment, it reacts as if you're in physical danger. The brain releases stress hormones like cortisol, and your self-talk spirals into protective pessimism. I shouldn't try. They'll laugh at me. I'll fail again. Over time, this chronic state of internal alert rewires the brain to see potential threats everywhere, even in your own thoughts. Psychologists refer to this state as rumination, the endless replaying of negative experiences and imagined scenarios. It's the mental equivalent of scratching a wound that never heals. Instead of helping you process emotions, rumination keeps you trapped in them. It's a key factor in depression and anxiety disorders, as the constant loop of negative self-talk strengthens the emotional circuits of fear and hopelessness. People caught in this cycle often describe their mind as noisy, exhausting, or cruel, a place that offers no rest. One of the most damaging forms of inner dialogue is catastrophic thinking, where small problems are blown out of proportion. A minor mistake becomes a symbol of total failure. A single rejection feels like a life verdict. The brain's default mode network, DMN, responsible for self-referential thinking, becomes hyperactive. This means your mind keeps circling back to you, your flaws, your past, your perceived shortcomings, until it feels impossible to escape your own thoughts. The result? A distorted self-image that sees imperfection as identity. But the most insidious part of harmful self-talk is that it feels true. Because the voice in your head sounds like you, it carries authority. You rarely question its accuracy. This creates a powerful illusion. If I thought it, it must be real. Yet neuroscience tells us the opposite, that thoughts are merely interpretations, shaped by experience, mood, and memory. The voice isn't always right, it's just familiar. And familiarity, in the human brain, often feels like truth. Research from Stanford University has shown that when people engage in harsh self-criticism, the same regions of the brain activate as when they experience physical pain. This means your brain doesn't distinguish much between being insulted by others and insulting yourself. In both cases, it experiences threat and distress. In contrast, practicing self-compassion, speaking to yourself with understanding rather than judgment, activates the brain's soothing system, releasing oxytocin and calming the stress response. The language you use with yourself literally determines how safe or unsafe your brain feels inside your own mind. Another danger of harmful self-talk is how it isolates. When people internalize negative narratives, I'm not good enough, I'll never succeed, they begin withdrawing from opportunities, relationships, and joy. Over time, their world shrinks, not because they're incapable, but because their inner voice convinces them they are. This self-imposed limitation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you believe your own criticism, the less you act against it, reinforcing the illusion that it was right all along. The dark side of the inner voice doesn't come from malice, it comes from fear. Often, it's a misguided attempt by the brain to protect you. The critical voice tries to prevent embarrassment, failure, or rejection by lowering your expectations. Don't try, it says, and you can't fail. But in doing so, it builds a cage around your potential. It mistakes safety for happiness and survival for fulfillment. To recognize when self-talk becomes harmful, you have to start noticing patterns. Do your thoughts make you feel smaller, weaker, or ashamed? Do they replay mistakes instead of lessons? Do they sound like someone else, a parent, a teacher, a bully, more than like you? That's your cue that your inner dialogue is no longer guidance. It's conditioning. The truth is, everyone has a dark voice sometimes. But you are not that voice. You are the awareness listening behind it, the one capable of choosing what thoughts deserve to stay and which deserve to fade. Once you understand that distinction, you begin reclaiming your mind's power. Because the goal isn't to silence your thoughts, it's to understand them and rewrite them into something that serves your growth, not your fear. To understand why we talk to ourselves, we have to explore how the brain learns language, not just to communicate with others, but to communicate with itself. From the moment we begin forming words as children, we're not just learning to express thoughts, we're learning to organize them. The human brain, unlike that of any other species, has developed a unique ability to use language as an internal feedback loop. We speak to ourselves to think, to plan, to remember, to feel safe, and to make sense of a world that's far too complex to face in silence. When a child starts speaking, a fascinating thing happens. Their problem-solving ability skyrockets. Developmental psychologists like Lev Vygotsky observed that children often talk out loud to themselves while playing or trying to solve a task. He called this private speech, an early form of self-talk. Over time, this external chatter becomes internalized, transforming into the silent inner voice adults experience. It's not random, it's the evolution of thought. In essence, the voice in your head is your mind thinking aloud, only quieter. Neuroscience confirms this transformation. Brain imaging studies show that when you talk to yourself silently, your Broca's area, responsible for speech production, and Wernicke's area, responsible for language comprehension, activate in the same way as when you speak aloud. Your brain doesn't treat inner speech as imaginary. It treats it as real communication. The only difference is that your motor cortex, which controls your mouth and tongue, stays inhibited. It's as if your brain is whispering without sound. This internal dialogue becomes the mechanism through which you process emotions, plan actions, and regulate behavior. But why do we develop such an internal narrator at all? The answer lies in self-regulation, the ability to control impulses, focus attention, and make long-term decisions. Without an inner voice, the mind would be a flood of emotions and impulses, reacting without reflection. Self-talk provides a pause between feeling and action, a moment to assess, plan, and choose. When you silently say, "Calm down," "You can do this," or even "Focus," you're activating the prefrontal cortex, the rational control center of the brain. It's your mind using language to govern itself. However, the tone and content of that inner speech depend on how it was shaped. As children, we internalize not only language, but the emotional tone with which it was used toward us. Supportive and encouraging voices tend to produce self-compassionate inner dialogues later in life. But if we grew up surrounded by harsh criticism or emotional neglect, our inner voice may mimic those tones, often unconsciously. This is why so many adults find themselves echoing the same judgments they once heard from others. The brain, in its effort to maintain continuity, repeats what it learned, even if it's painful. Interestingly, the default mode network, DMN, a set of brain regions active during rest or introspection, plays a central role in inner speech. It's the system that activates when your mind wanders, when you replay conversations, or when you imagine the future. In moderation, this self-referential thinking helps with creativity, empathy, and planning. But when it becomes overactive, it can lead to rumination, the endless mental replay of regrets, fears, or criticisms. Essentially, your brain's natural ability to think about itself can turn into self-torture if left unchecked. One fascinating experiment by Canadian neuroscientists found that people who engaged in positive, instructional self-talk performed better under stress, both cognitively and emotionally. Their brains showed reduced amygdala activation, meaning less fear, and increased activity in regions associated with problem-solving. But those who practiced negative or judgmental inner dialogue showed the opposite pattern. Their brains lit up as though facing real danger. This demonstrates that the content of our inner voice changes how our brain experiences reality itself. So, self-talk isn't merely psychological, it's neurological. It's the interface between language, emotion, and identity. Every thought we verbalize internally is both a reflection and a reinforcement of how we see ourselves. Over time, this becomes a feedback loop. The more we tell ourselves something, the more the brain believes it, and the more it shapes future perception to confirm that belief. This process, known as confirmation bias, ensures that our inner narrative becomes self-sustaining. This is why changing self-talk is so powerful, yet so difficult. It's not just about changing words, it's about rewiring identity. The voice you hear inside isn't just a tool. It's the sum of your experiences, your culture, your fears, your ambitions. It's the echo of every word spoken to you and by you. But it's also dynamic, capable of growth, healing, and transformation. When you consciously alter the tone of your inner dialogue, when you replace "I'm such a failure" with "I'm learning to improve," you're not lying to yourself. You're teaching your brain a new way to interpret the world. Slowly, those new phrases begin to feel natural. And eventually, that inner voice becomes less of a critic and more of a coach. The brain learns through repetition, and your self-talk is the most consistent lesson it receives. You can't stop thinking, but you can teach your mind how to speak to itself. And that, more than anything, determines the difference between a mind that tortures itself and one that guides itself toward peace. For centuries, talking to yourself was considered a sign of madness. People hid their inner dialogue like a secret, afraid it might make them seem unstable. But modern neuroscience has flipped that belief entirely. Today, scientists understand that self-talk is not a symptom of insanity. It's a hallmark of intelligence. The more aware and intentional you are about the voice in your head, the more effectively you can direct your focus, manage your emotions, and enhance your cognitive abilities. In essence, how you speak to yourself can determine how efficiently your brain operates. Imagine a tennis player muttering, "Keep your eye on the ball, steady," or a surgeon quietly saying, "Now clamp, good next step." That's not random mumbling. It's instructional self-talk, a method used by top performers in every field to enhance precision and control. Studies from the University of Thessaly found that athletes who used deliberate, positive self-talk performed better under pressure, made fewer mistakes, and recovered faster from errors. Why? Because talking to yourself helps convert complex thought into focused action. It engages the brain's executive control system, filtering distractions and reinforcing intent. When you talk to yourself, especially using action-oriented language like focus, breathe, or remember, your brain activates goal-oriented neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and working memory. Verbalizing thoughts, even silently, helps your mind structure them, reducing chaos and ambiguity. It's the same reason people write to-do lists or talk through a problem. Putting thoughts into words organizes them. One fascinating discovery from psychologist Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan revealed that using third-person self-talk, referring to yourself by name, enhances emotional regulation and performance. For example, saying, "You can handle this, Ariba," instead of "I can handle this," creates psychological distance between you and the emotion. It tricks the brain into viewing the situation from an outsider's perspective, which engages the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, a region involved in rational analysis. This shift quiets the amygdala, your brain's fear center, reducing anxiety and improving composure under stress. Self-talk also enhances memory and learning. When you repeat information to yourself, like "the capital of France is Paris," or "the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell," you're reinforcing neural connections in the hippocampus, the brain's memory hub. This phenomenon, known as verbal rehearsal, helps transfer short-term memories into long-term storage. It's why students who talk through their study material out loud often retain information better than those who silently read. In essence, language acts as a scaffold that supports cognition. But the benefits go beyond focus and learning. Self-talk is also a tool for emotional regulation. When you face stress or uncertainty, the words you tell yourself can determine whether your body enters panic or calm. Saying, "I can't handle this," releases cortisol and adrenaline, priming your body for distress. But saying, "I can take this one step at a time," triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows your heart rate and restores balance. You're not just calming your mind, you're rewiring your body's stress response. In fact, a study from Bangor University showed that participants who used self-talk during stressful tasks maintained lower blood pressure and exhibited better cognitive control. Their inner dialogue acted like a built-in therapist, grounding them when external chaos threatened to overwhelm them. Another remarkable function of self-talk is how it enhances metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. This is what separates humans from most other species. When you reflect on your thoughts, "Why am I feeling this way?" or "What's the best solution here?" you're engaging in a dialogue with your own consciousness. This meta-awareness improves problem-solving and decision-making. It's why self-aware individuals tend to make better judgments. They consult their inner voice, not as a critic, but as a partner in reasoning. However, the quality of self-talk matters just as much as its presence. Constructive self-talk doesn't deny difficulty, it reframes it. Instead of saying, I'm terrible at this. Effective inner dialogue sounds like, this is challenging, but I'm improving. This subtle change shifts your brain from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, as described by psychologist Carol Dweck. It keeps dopamine flowing, which increases motivation and curiosity, two ingredients essential for learning and resilience. When you start noticing and guiding your inner speech, you realize how much power it holds. Each phrase becomes a command to your brain, a signal to either panic or persevere, to retreat or to rise. Over time, these commands shape your habits, your focus, and even your sense of self. So, talking to yourself isn't weird. It's one of the most sophisticated tools evolution ever gave us. It's your mind's way of steering itself through the noise of life, translating chaos into clarity. The people who learn to use that voice wisely, who speak to themselves with focus, compassion, and intention, aren't just calmer. They're sharper, more adaptable, and infinitely more aware. Because intelligence isn't just what you know. It's how you speak to the part of yourself that's always listening. There's a strange truth about the voice inside your head. It knows things about you that you don't consciously realize. Every thought you whisper internally, every quiet judgment, every comforting reassurance or hidden fear, comes not from nowhere, but from deep within your subconscious. Your self-talk isn't random chatter. It's the surface-level echo of everything you've ever experienced, believed, feared, and desired. If you listen carefully enough, it can reveal the blueprint of your subconscious mind. The subconscious operates like a vast storage room, holding your earliest memories, emotional imprints, and learned beliefs. While the conscious mind handles logic and immediate decisions, the subconscious governs your habits, fears, and automatic reactions. It's what makes you flinch at a tone of voice that reminds you of an old argument, or what drives you to seek approval because of rejection once felt long ago. Self-talk acts as the translator between these two layers of consciousness, the rational and the instinctive. When you talk to yourself, you're essentially overhearing your subconscious communicating with your conscious awareness. Consider how your inner dialogue changes depending on your emotional state. When you're calm, it's often rational and encouraging. Let's handle this step by step. But when fear or insecurity rises, the tone shifts. You always mess things up, or they're judging you. That change doesn't come from logic. It's the voice of stored experiences surfacing. Each word your inner voice chooses reflects a belief buried deep inside your subconscious, often one formed years or even decades ago. Neuroscience shows that the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex all play key roles in this internal communication. The amygdala attaches emotion to experience, the hippocampus stores the memory, and the prefrontal cortex gives it words. When an event triggers a subconscious memory, even slightly, your brain replays that emotional pattern through inner speech. This is why certain situations instantly make you doubt yourself or replay self-critical phrases. Your subconscious is replaying the script it wrote long ago. Sigmund Freud was one of the first to describe this phenomenon, arguing that our inner dialogues often represent the ongoing negotiation between the ID, primitive drives, ego, rational thought, and superego, moral conscience. Though Freud's theories are controversial, modern psychology agrees on one core idea. The conscious and subconscious are in constant dialogue. What you call self-talk is often this conversation leaking into awareness. This becomes especially clear in moments of self-sabotage. Imagine preparing for a big opportunity, a presentation, a relationship, a dream you've always wanted, and suddenly your inner voice says, "You're not ready," or "You'll embarrass yourself." Rationally, you might know that's untrue, but emotionally it feels real. That's your subconscious trying to protect you from perceived pain by keeping you within the boundaries of the familiar. It confuses safety with comfort, and so it whispers warnings whenever you try to grow beyond old limitations. But here's the twist. That same voice can also reveal hidden wisdom. The subconscious absorbs every piece of information your senses collect, even the ones you consciously overlook. Sometimes, when you hear yourself think something unexpectedly insightful, that's not random. It's your subconscious piecing together patterns your conscious mind hasn't yet recognized. Intuition often speaks through inner dialogue, those quiet sentences that arrive uninvited but prove to be right later on. So, your self-talk is both the mirror and the messenger. It mirrors your unhealed parts, your fears, your conditioning, but it also delivers messages from the intuitive depths of your being. The key is to listen with discernment. When your inner voice speaks in tones of panic or shame, it's revealing wounds that need compassion, not agreement. When it speaks with clarity and calm, it may be guiding you toward truth. Cognitive behavioral therapists use this principle when helping clients change their thinking patterns. They teach people to identify automatic thoughts, the subconscious phrases that pop up instantly in response to triggers. By writing these down and analyzing them, individuals can trace each one back to its origin: a childhood experience, a belief learned from parents, or a past failure. Once you see where the voice came from, you realize it's not absolute truth, it's programming. And programming can be rewritten. In brain terms, this process of reprogramming uses neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections and weaken old ones. Every time you respond to a self-critical thought with understanding instead of judgment, you reduce its emotional power. Every time you affirm a new, healthier belief, you strengthen a different neural circuit. Slowly, your subconscious learns new language, and your self-talk begins to change on its own. Your inner voice, then, isn't something to silence or fear. It's something to understand. It's a reflection of your inner world, speaking in metaphors, memories, and emotions. When you listen without resistance, it becomes a guide. When you challenge it with compassion, it becomes a healer. And when you align it with your conscious goals, it becomes your greatest ally. Because the real magic of self-talk isn't that it fills the silence. It's that it gives you access to the parts of yourself you've forgotten to listen to. The voice in your head is not your enemy. It's your story, waiting to be rewritten, word by word. The voice inside your head is not something to silence. It's something to master. For most people, that voice operates on autopilot, echoing years of conditioning, fears, and beliefs without conscious oversight. But once you learn how to guide it, to train it as you would a muscle, it transforms from a critic into a coach, from noise into navigation. The process isn't about pretending everything is fine or drowning out your doubts with blind optimism. It's about building an honest, intelligent relationship with your own mind. The first step to mastering your inner voice is awareness. You can't change what you don't notice. Throughout the day, pause and observe how you speak to yourself. Notice the tone, the language, and the triggers. Is it gentle or harsh? Encouraging or critical? Awareness pulls the voice out of the subconscious shadows and into conscious light. And that's where transformation begins. Most people live as if their thoughts are facts. They never realize that the voice narrating their life can be questioned. Once you realize that you are the listener, not the voice itself, you gain the power to choose which words to believe. The next step is reframing. When a negative thought appears, I'm going to fail, I'm not good enough, you don't need to fight it. Fighting creates resistance, and resistance strengthens it. Instead, acknowledge it and shift its meaning. For example, this is hard, but I've faced challenges before. Reframing doesn't deny reality. It redefines it in a way that empowers rather than paralyzes you. Neuroscientists have found that each time you reinterpret a thought, your brain rewires slightly, weakening old fear circuits and strengthening new pathways of resilience. This is cognitive alchemy, turning self-criticism into self-direction. The third practice is externalization, giving the voice a name or identity separate from yourself. This might sound strange, but research from the University of Michigan shows that talking to yourself in the third person, "You can handle this, Sarah," instead of "I can handle this," helps you view your situation more objectively. You create psychological distance between the thought and your identity. Over time, you begin to see that your thoughts are not commands, they're suggestions. You can choose which ones to follow. Another powerful tool is intentional self-talk, consciously designing the phrases your mind will use in moments of stress or uncertainty. Think of it as mental programming. Athletes, astronauts, and even military professionals use self-talk scripts to maintain focus and composure. A climber might say, "One step, one breath." A student might repeat, "Stay calm, think clearly." These aren't cliches, they're verbal anchors that train the nervous system to respond calmly. Your words become internal cues that shape performance and emotion. But mastering self-talk isn't just about performance, it's about compassion. Too many people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they love. The brain remembers those words, each one carving emotional grooves that deepen over time. Self-compassion doesn't mean avoiding accountability. It means treating mistakes as part of growth, not as proof of failure. Studies by psychologist Kristin Neff show that people who practice self-compassion are more resilient, motivated, and mentally healthy. They don't fear mistakes because their inner voice responds with guidance, not punishment. Meditation and journaling can also help refine your inner dialogue. Meditation teaches you to observe thoughts without judgment, to hear the voice without reacting. Journaling translates those thoughts into language, making them tangible and easier to analyze. Together, they create a bridge between awareness and understanding. You begin to see patterns. The phrases that appear in moments of doubt, the tone that emerges under stress, the beliefs that no longer serve you. Awareness leads to editing, and editing leads to liberation. Finally, remember that self-talk is a lifelong dialogue. The goal isn't to silence the inner voice, but to make it a friend worth listening to. You'll still have days when it doubts, complains, or fears. But mastery means you can meet those moments with calm authority. I hear you, you'll say, but I choose differently. That simple sentence marks the boundary between being ruled by your thoughts and leading them. When you change the way you talk to yourself, you change the chemistry of your brain, the quality of your emotions, and the direction of your life. Over time, that inner voice, once critical or chaotic, begins to speak with clarity, confidence, and kindness. It becomes the voice of wisdom, the quiet strength that whispers, "You've got this," when the world feels too loud. Because mastery isn't the absence of the inner voice, it's harmony with it. The human mind was never meant to be silent. It was meant to be understood, guided, and loved. When you learn to make peace with your thoughts, the noise becomes music, and that voice inside, once your enemy, becomes your most loyal ally.